Hi, my name is Luke Oliver. I'm the writer, director and producer on Elindil's Secret. This is a stream that involves a lot of the effects and shots that were done during the movie. There was actually a lot of special effects done for this movie, even from this very first shot where the moon appears and it kind of comes from a multifaceted colour. And I just want something a little abstract to start the movie. Throughout the movie, there really is a lot of effect shots, and I felt like it would be appropriate to dedicate a stream to this. I had help with the effect shot count through. Mostly John Peel was the person that helped me, who also kind of came up with the idea. He had the concept with me, and Michael Knights was the other person who was also the assistant director on the movie. See very quickly, all these shots are computer generated, took lots and lots of time, hours and hours. This shot here probably took 5 computers a month to create this one single shot, and you've already seen three shots like this. So every one of these shots took hours and hours and hours, and it wasn't just hours for one computer, hours on multiple computers. This shot, the shot coming up after this, all took so many hours to render, it's not funny. A lot of these shots, we're trying to make them as realistic as possible. Some of the failings come, the wood texture is not quite correct. If this is supposed to be the arc, it probably wouldn't have had such straight columns, probably would have had much more thicker columns. And again, these are kind of insights that you get along the way. It's almost too late because you've rendered too many other shots and you spent too many hours rendering shots, even all these backgrounds. The very first shot we see of Elindil is a moving shot, and the camera's tilting up. And what I wanted to do in this movie is I wanted to make sure the camera could move even during the effect shots. It doesn't mean the camera moves for every shot, but I wanted to make sure the camera could move. And almost it was an experiment to make sure we could do it, and I shot the first scene. This was the very first blue screen scene with Elindil that we shot, and even though the camera moves, I was very unsure whether it would work. And it wasn't really until it got into the hands of Pete Brewer to colour it that I kind of felt like it was safe. And we'd created mostly, in most cases, something that was realistic. Maybe not every shot's photoreal, but mostly it was realistic. We're dealing with lots of complexities. You're dealing with different lights, dealing with different focal depths, and you're trying to constantly kind of, in every shot, create a realness. And try and make sure every shot has realness. This is all blue screen. This whole scene is blue screen. That shot there is one of the about 3 shots that don't have any blue screen elements in it. Everything else has blue screen, and it's all been extracted. It's all been replaced. It all has color requirements. It all has focus requirements, and things to try and make it seem real. And then there's just the element of trying to reduce the amount of blue spill that ends up occurring on the characters when you're trying to do these shots. It's quite a complex thing, and a scene like this has taken years, really, to perfect, and probably a scene that I return to maybe as many as 10 to 15 times in order to perfect. And then just simply a shot like this takes quite a long time to render, although mostly this was done in a program called Shake. And it was able to render these things quickly. But you take the moon element, you take a name element like Elindil, another element like Secret, and you try and do that effect where the glow has this blur effect. It's quite complex. It's nice to have a break and actually just shoot something that doesn't have any computer effects in it, like this little sequence here. And yet, from a colour grade perspective, there's still quite a bit going on to make all the different shots seem like they're cut together. This shot coming up where he looks at the rock is an element that's been put on the rock. That is not. That element is placed on the rock. to make that look real is quite difficult, and then the colour grade to make it look real is also quite difficult again. Without a chance to rest, we're already in another blue screen scene. This is 100% blue screen backgrounds. My brother Daniel is the lead character here. He did an amazing job to kind of make this scene come alive. These scenes were always shot the same, so as the actors would come in, we'd kind of have the same elements, and in some cases, not in every case, but in some cases where we knew they would be walking into the same scene, we would actually light it once and have the actors from the different scenes come through that lighting sequence, so that we weren't having to go back and light it again. So we had the actors come through rather than work through an entire scene and shoot a whole scene where we knew there were the same elements happening with the same actors or with different actors. We would light it once and shoot it with the different actors coming through. That's not usually done in movies. Usually you'd shoot a scene on its own and you would treat the scene as its own character and flavour. I already had a sense that in a lot of these scenes I wanted repetition to actually be a part of the characteristic that would allow the audience to know what was going to happen. So in those cases, why not have the lighting set up, and therefore why not have different characters placed in that same lighting? For us, shooting it the way we did, that was a great time saver. There's a lot of complexity going on here. The camera is moving nearly all the time, which means that the backgrounds are having to be moved with the characters and with the movement that the camera is following. They are interacting, in this case, with elements. That's very complicated. I always cut it in such a way that it always felt like it was not necessarily a special effects movie. I always wanted it to feel like it was just cut like it was shot in a studio, so that would give it a sense of realism. There is so much happening here. Those falls that happen, Daniel falling, the blue screen requirements for those falls is horrendous. We had him jump off the side of a building for one of those shots, so he is nowhere near inside a cave. He is jumping off the side of the building, and literally everything else apart from him and his costume is being replaced. And then we get into a scene like this where really the effect is the colour grade. People did such a great job on trying to not only make the pictures feel like they're in the same place, but also just give them such an amazing look. This location did look amazing when we shot it, but he had a lot of problems making sure that shots like this of me felt like they're in the same location. And we did shoot in the same location, but sometimes the light just changes so dramatically and so quickly it doesn't feel like it's the same place. And to make this and then feel like the next scene where they're chasing each other is also very difficult. Some of this was shot in the middle of the day, so to feel like it's kind of at night time is quite difficult. Yeah, there are little things that give it away, but ultimately Pete Broad did such a great job to bring this all together. This scene was meant to be shot in an entirely different location. We were meant to be at the top of a much higher mountain, but it was just clouded in, it was fogged in. You couldn't see anything, there was no depth behind them, and I really wanted to feel like they were high, so that when we finally do the effect shot of him falling, it felt like it was in the same location. I think ultimately we got into a place where it was pretty close. We certainly, when he steps forward and we see the shot that's a bit wider, I mean this shot, you get the sense of depth around them. And then this one here, you certainly get the depth, and then that one where they fall. I think it all feels organic and like it's together. Kind of follow that cloth around a bit, and hopefully the audience kind of gets, okay, that cloth is the same cloth, and that's how the story has been carried from 3 months ago through to here. Within this section, there's not a lot of effect shots per se, but this scene was edited from, we probably shot it 4 or 5 different times, this scene, and ultimately two of the times we shot it were used. This is the original take, this area, this element.
Marcus told you. He sent me. I have coffee. Here.
This original time, we really wanted to sell all the books, and there was a lot of back and forwards between this area in the kitchen and the books. Whereas when we came back to shoot it again, it became much more about the cloth.
I was hoping for some peace and quiet.
So she steps forward here.
The paper.
Max steps to see her, and his paper has a picture on it, which it tracks quite well. It was replaced. It wasn't that picture that's there, but it was certainly replaced from the picture that was originally in the paper. We're now in the scene that was the second last time we shot it. The final time we shot this scene was actually disregarded entirely. It was shot in a different location. But this is the second last time that we shot this scene. And I think ultimately it had all the components that we wanted. There's quite a big edit where she pulls that out of her top. If I had have had the chance to go back and shoot it, I would have made more of her pulling that out, just for the sake of Andrew being uncomfortable about where she pulled it from. But when I originally shot it, the scene was not about her pulling it out, it was about her family, and so it wasn't appropriate to make it that a big feature. And when I kind of put into the final edit, I just had to live with what we'd originally shot. I had to get rid of the dialogue that was in between and live with the shots that we'd put there. I think you still get that where she's pulled it from, and that there might be some uncomfortableness, and certainly at the end of this scene, Andrew is quite uncomfortable. But in terms of effects, really the only effect going on here is that the lighting, we shot this at night time, and you can kind of see when you see out the windows, it really is very dark outside. This had got well and truly beyond what we could shoot this scene, and we did the best we could. I think there are some tells to say that it really is dark outside, but John did the best he could to light it and make it feel like it was daytime. And now we actually get into a scene where it was day, and yet we're so far inside it kind of feels a bit like night anyway. And Andrew feels awkward. This was a pickup shoot. We picked this up. It was one of the last shoots we did, and now we click to like day 7 of shooting. So we're now into cutting between day 7 and a very final shoot. All the stuff of Dave Seraphin in the 4-wheel drive is earlier stuff, and all the Abigail and Max is a pickup shoot. The dialogue needed to be changed, and it wasn't right. And even that shot there, looking through the 4-wheel drive, Dave wasn't anywhere near that shot. It's just all the pickup. And this is also a pickup shoot, this little moment here. We found a nice little location. Really the key to shooting this was to not give away too much of Dave Donchi, who is the guy in white. He'd cut his hair before we did this, and so I couldn't, in that last little shot I actually had to colour his head in as it moves, because you could just tell that he was bald. And apart from that, we never see his head. And it kind of forced me to do this little effect here where every time he's punched, Pete leaves the frame, and we put makeup on him and he comes back in. And we kind of moved time, and look, his jacket doesn't completely move. There's a few frames where I had to do a bit of trickery to kind of make it flow from one to the next, but ultimately he's leaving frame, he's getting makeup put on him, and we're cutting time in order for him to come back into frame. And that's the little trick that was done there to make that makeup effect work. I'm sure people think, oh, they sprayed stuff on him or whatever. It was really a very slow makeup effect that was done, and we compressed time by cutting out all the frames that we didn't use and by not moving the camera.
You know what they say, mate.
There's a lot of lighting issues here in this scene. This was shot very late in the day, and I think the background was not very bright, and we had a lot of light kind of shooting them, which is not how we shot a lot of the movie. We didn't shoot it with a lot of light. So it feels like it's not quite in the rest of the movie.
This expensive?
No, I didn't bother to change the paper here. We didn't see enough of it to really warrant making it all feel effective, but we obviously had about 4 or 5 different papers that we used at different times as we slowly developed the story. The only real effect here is a number plate being replaced, which 26DO is my brother was 26, Daniel Oliver, and that's his birthday. And this car is his wife's car now. back then, just his girlfriend's car, which was wonderful to have people kind of allow their cars to be used, and this car particularly because later on it gets quite wet. This is all blue screen. That's entirely blue screen. The background with Marcus is all blue screen. I think it actually sat quite well. I don't think many people will be able to tell that Marcus's background is blue screen. The car shots are a bit more obvious. Movement is hard to sell, but Marcus is I think it's quite well done. There's number plates being replaced here all the time. That's all happening as effects. It is nice every now and then to do stuff that doesn't have any effects. That's really just colour grade driven, which every shot has been touched with Peter Brewer's magic pen as he kind of grades everything to just, even when you move a location slightly or move shot slightly, everything needs to be graded. It needs to match and come together. Effect shot coming up here is a bit of a slow motion move. But that's not much of an effect. But really, the main effect coming up here is the knife. Knife is 100. I didn't feel comfortable putting the knife out in public, and this was shot out in public. So the knife is completely generated as an extra element. And then the other effect here is the car coming through. Two different shots put together to make it look like it's one. A bit of sound effects to make it feel like it's organic. This had a little bit going on. David put on a little bit of weight when we came to do this pickup, so I actually skinnied him down, which he probably won't be happy about. And then as the camera moves, the whip pan here actually joins a different shot. So as that whip pan happened, we jump about a year back in time. And it was a bit of work to try and make that feel organic. To me, it still feels a bit... it's a bit obvious to me, but hopefully the audience doesn't pick it up. The only other issue we had with this shot, or with this kind of scene, is that I had to shrink a lot of the shots down. I had to tighten them up. We were seeing a lot of edges, seeing a lot of matte box on the sides of frame, and it was just something we didn't pick up during shooting. So you end up kind of a lot tighter than you originally hoped. I think it still works, but some of the shots are a little tighter than I wanted, particularly 2 shots.
Ouch. So, what are we looking for? Gold?
This shot was very bright, and people kind of restored it, helped it. That shot there is actually a shot that's reversed, and it's shot kind of from above the waterfall, but I think it sells that they're walking towards the waterfall, so I used it there. Again, these are all little tricks. Not all of this is planned, but you kind of find little moments. You go, you know what, that will work, and it's a nice little musical interlude and leads back into this scene here. You'll see the depth of focus. We are dealing with a very, very small depth of field with the camera adapter that we're using, and it was quite a challenge for most of the shoot. Really, at the end of the day, we ended up shooting most of the movie on one lens. Anything that's shot without being blue screen is essentially shot on this one lens. Now, even when we come up over the waterfall, and we had no ability to change focus there. You just had to kind of set it and make the shot work. And this shot here was a wide angle shot, and people did a lot to fix the edges. We didn't have enough good lenses to make the shots work that we wanted. We just really had to rely on one. It ultimately ended up being a $50 lens, which was an amazing find, and it was spectacular. The lens was amazing, but it just ended up being so good that we just had to shoot the whole thing on this lens. So much of these shots is about getting the camera nice and close. You have to change the shot sizes by putting the camera in a different position, not by putting on a different lens. Most movies you put on different lens sizes, you don't necessarily have to move the camera. Well, in our case, we had to move the camera, and we got a lot of energy from actually shooting handheld, and the lens we had was quite acceptable for doing that. This scene is shot in so many different locations. You've got Trentham Falls, you've got this here, which is shot in Bermagui. You've got blue screen shots like this one back into Bermagui.
Maybe. Hang on a sec.
we're back in the studio again. This is all blue screen. We're at Grampians now with David. We're back into Bermagui. It was quite a challenge to kind of even imagine how this would be shot. And now we're at Lilydale Lake. Now we're in the studio. We're still in the studio. We're at Lilydale Lake. We're back in the studio. We're at Lilydale
Watch
Lake.
the creator who made them pure.
We're in Bermagui's studio and back in the studio, but on a different day because we didn't have Dave and those two available. Now we're in Lilydale.
Linked to the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Back in the studio. It's studio on a different day.
As in the Bible.
You can see the challenge already that's happening, and then suddenly we're shooting shots that are in a pool, which is about to happen. So we have a pool, now we have studio, then we have Trentham, then we have studio, then we have pool, then we have studio, then we have Trentham, which is an effect shot. Then we have, it's just you are cutting together shots from so many different locations and trying to make them feel real. And so much of it is happening because Pete Brewer is colouring each shot and making it feel like it's the same. We also had a crane up at Trentham Falls. No, we're in Warburton, we're in Grampians, we're at Trentham, we're at Grampians, back in Warburton, back to the Grampians, Warburton. Just this constant cutting between different locations. This is now a pickup shoot, so this is a year later. We came back and shot this. Everything's shot on different days. We end up cutting to a scene in a moment where there's a lot of sunlight, which was shot on a different day, but then the close-ups are a shot of Dave Croyder, who picks up the stone, and he's shot much later on. It's shot a couple of days later when there's a lot more sun. So all of these shots are just cut together, and different people are in them, and we're doing our best to cut it together and make it feel like it's all organic. And we're back in Trentham with Dave running, and the camera is running with Dave, and then we're back to Bermagui, trying to make all this kind of feel seamless and cut the angles in so it feels like it's at the same time. It's very difficult. And then you end up with another effect shot with this big jump where we only had one take. Cassie has to jump, and Daniel jumps into a very specific position. We get rid of his splash. That's how we did that shot. So his splash is removed. He actually jumped into the water. The rest of this is just shots, but that's the one effect shot when they both jump into the water and his splash is removed.
We have it.
Again, this is all, they're all different locations, all being cut together to make it feel like they're close or they're in similar areas. Not necessarily even on the same day. That little whip pan crossed the stream of water, so half of it started on one side of the water, the other half finished on the other side of the water. The camera literally moved during that shot, and there's just lots happening that are effects driven.
What do you want with me?
Another thing I wanted is I always wanted the camera moving, and we did try and dolly as much as possible. In the studio we didn't. The studio we panned and tilted. When we were out and about, we tried to move the camera as much as possible, just to give the whole movie energy. Little shots like this, just a little bit of movement. Just timing it so that we catch little looks.
No, come back here. Good work. And
then we have a moment here where we see kind of the power of Handress, his eyes. They're not necessarily a very complicated effect, but quite effective. And do a little zoom into him, cut to a different shot, zoom back out again. Little flashes of white that all help those moments, plus the sound effects, give them energy, make them a little bit scary. Apart from that, we're just dealing with that small depth of field. Even the wider shots like that one, everything is blurry in the background. The background's constantly blurry, and to even get three characters in focus is quite difficult. And we're dealing with a wide format, so a shot like this, you end up with a lot of space on the left of frame, but it works. Well, this is just sped up. I liked using cutting frames, so in a moment where something needed to be sped up, I actually cut a few frames. And so a moment where, say, she would twist the head, you cut a few frames and it just feels like it's very violent. Now here it was a very dark day, but we cut into a studio. That shot's actually done in the studio, and then we cut back to the same shot again. This is all this stuff in the car, including the cigarette being pulled by a piece of string. Is all done in the studio.
Was that one of them?
I'm cutting between studio shots with blue screen to real shots that we shot hanging out the back of cars.
Jack, for all we know.
In any way we could to get whatever shots, and then obviously just by the side of the road panning with cars.
Can we lose him?
Oh, yeah. We're really going to lose him in this.
It was a bit of an endeavour because not everyone was even there at the same time, so you see kind of Andrew in the back of some of these shots, but he wasn't there, someone was wearing his shirt. And probably the biggest effect that happened through the water is the fact that even still all of these number plates are being replaced, which when a car's flying through water was quite difficult. Even little things like we had a mysterious shadow occur, not in this shot but I think in the next shot, and that shadow had to be replaced because it was just too obvious that someone was there. So in this shot here there's a shadow on the ground on the brickwork. You could just see that it was there, and so it had to be replaced. Little things like that just have to be done, otherwise the shot will it won't be authentic anymore. The more of the challenges here is we've got our assistant walking in rather than Cassie playing in the white shirt. So Cassie actually wasn't very available when we shot this scene, so we had to kind of shoot around her. You'll see lots of shots with her in it, but even that shot there, she's not in it. And we kind of shot the whole scene around her, so we shot her bits in a two shot and a single, and then we went back after she'd left and shot everything else, and so she just isn't there while we're shooting it. But apart from that, there's not a lot of effect shots during this scene. It's really just cutting around the fact that sometimes there are people there, sometimes there aren't. That was a big challenge in lots of different scenes, particularly in some of the blue screen, particularly in some of the caves, where we just couldn't get the same people available on the same day, so we kind of had to shoot two shots, or we never shoot a wide shot because not everyone was available. And even when we get to the final scene in the cave, you've got essentially shots that is built up of lots of different people in different moments shot against blue screen, and you build those moments up.
We don't have anything. The jar was empty.
It can't be right.
Apart from that, a scene like this, really the colour grade is a real challenge. Every single shot is at different times of the day, just because it takes so long to shoot different elements. So, you've got a morning shot with Cassie versus a shot with Dave that's shot later in the afternoon. So you've just got different light and different light affecting the actors, and it's different colours. So you just takes time to make it all feel like it's been shot at the same time. This is all happening at the same time. And again we've got the issue of the background behind Dave shooting out the window. It's just always going to look a little bit different to perhaps some of the other shots.
The only thing we can do, find the secret.
And then we're also dealing with the fact that we've got such a low depth of field and not a lot of light. Anytime we went inside, we just struggled for light. We had to pump a lot of light in to kind of make the lens be able to work. And it was a real struggle. It was a real struggle to make it work. A shot like this where he walks really close, you can see how much out of focus the background is. Even a little move like that, you just see how far Max is out of focus.
We need to find out more.
And also, look, I was trying to move the camera a lot, trying to really pan with people, trying to make... I couldn't shoot a wide shot. I couldn't get back and shoot a wide shot. So I had to use two shots that would pan, or shots that would pan in order to kind of show the location, show where people were. And so there's a lot of camera movement that probably wouldn't normally be there in a normal shot or a normal scene like this where people are talking, just because I had to kind of show off where people were. It was a real challenge. You have a moment like this again where the lighting is so different in the final. We shot this, it was all very orange. You could see on the cheeks of Jess how orange she kind of was, and the whole shot was very much that way, and Pete's done a lot to kind of bring it back and make it feel like it's in the same space. Just the original tension of shooting and what originally was intended changed, and see, part of colour grade is to bring that all to life. The other thing is, originally the spans of time that this was all meant to happen in was this was supposed to be getting much darker at this point in time. So yeah, Pete had to do a lot of work to kind of bring this all into afternoon. Everything's now afternoon. It feels like we sit in afternoon for a very long time, even though when we come to Ray here, we're in afternoon essentially, even though we've got candles lit. It's all afternoon, and we get away with it because he's blind and his house would be so dark. So you kind of get away with the fact that it would be afternoon and still lit by candles in order to help these other people that can see. There's no effects here. Visually, it's all makeup effects, so that's all makeup on Grant to make his eyes have that cut effect. This, again, was a very late shoot, so if you look out the windows, it's starting to get quite dark, and as we go through the scene, it gets darker and darker out the windows. It's just, you know, it was just never enough time to shoot anything. We just never had enough days or daylight in order to just, you know, the background behind Dave Seraphin there is really quite dark. We're just struggling for light, and that means also when we get into the close-ups on Andrew, which we would do later, you know, everything is lit. There's nothing that's actual natural daylight. So you're trying to replicate what would be natural daylight coming through the windows. And I think, you know, John did a really good job of trying to light all that amidst our struggles. Try not to make it look too dark at this point in time, even though we now jump inside. He's lit a fire and there's candles. You know, that really, the hope is people understand, well, it's a dark house and that's just the way it is. And originally when I wrote it, this was actually meant to be night time, but you kind of, as you go through and you realise when things need to happen, you kind of go, okay, look, this is not going to work if this goes overnight at this point in time. Plus, as we learned how difficult it was to make stuff look like night time, it kind of became a necessity to not necessarily make everything at night. You know, we just could not. We didn't have enough light to be able to make things look like night time. So we had to kind of shoot during the day, and that just forced us into this position where we had this everlasting afternoon. But during this scene, the lighting was by John was really amazing. I think, you know, it's really interesting. Lots of light and shadows and a really interesting location. We've also got some CG effects like this one. And we've also got, later in the scene, we've got a lot of blue screen with Elindil, which I think is really quite effective. There's some really nice backgrounds. This shot here was always a bit dorky, I thought. It didn't let linger too long. Everyone's hands weren't quite authentic. It was a bit weird. Again, when you're pushed shooting-wise, you kind of put up with things that you wouldn't necessarily put up with. But you just pushed until you go, okay, that'll do, and you grab the best bit and you make it work.
Was one of them. Years later, the real Hebrew scriptures were found.
And now we jump into this stuff. This stuff, to me, it all looks good. The grading is amazing. Pete Brewer did an amazing job to really bring this stuff come to life. I think the lighting's really nice. It's nice to have such shadows, such light. I really wanted to bring a sense of Elindil being a little bit sinister, and that his intentions weren't entirely pure. I would have loved, and if I had the time, I would have made her and his eyes sit in the same spot during the dissolve.
They are the chosen. The ones that truly know what the secret is.
Then the clan know where it is and what it is.
No, they don't. You see, before the chosen
It's quite a long scene, and
the secret was lost.
there's a lot of cutting around. I'm glad that it looks as good as it does, otherwise I think it would be very boring. I just hope that the dialogue is interesting enough for people to kind of engage with it and understand it. There's a lot in it. If you really sit and listen, there's actually a lot of information, and a lot of information that could just kind of pass you by. But hopefully it all sits succinctly, and obviously you'll get more information in the other commentary stream.
Quickly, you must get there before he does.
Who?
Again, still not a lot of effects. This is really just plain shooting, plain lighting. A lot of the lighting effects on the faces where it's flickering is someone rubbing their hands against the light, so that little flickering happens.
Yes.
It wasn't necessarily about the fire, even though the fire was lit. And this shot here is actually flipped, but if you look at the number plate's the right way around because we replaced the number plate. So that's one of the advantages of replacing number plates. You can actually flip the shot and make it work. It's almost the exact same shot it was used during the chase earlier. This is all blue screen stuff. A lot of the secrets in this blue screen is putting a blur around the faces, and it's a little glow effect. And you kind of allow the light that's happening outside to glow onto them, and vice versa, the light that's on their faces to glow onto the background. So you have this kind of dual effect going on, and it just blends. It blends between what's happening in the background and the foreground. Now, these shots were done, we actually sat on top of a car as it tracked around. And again, there's a bit of a replacement done there. This shot here is really interesting. Dave Kreuter wasn't available, so he there is actually shot blue screen, and we shot the background as an independent thing, even though the camera pans. It's quite complicated when it came to putting it together. This is just a scary shot. The flies are real. But he basically, Dave Kreuter was put into that scene even though he wasn't available on the day, which was quite interesting.
Looks like Ray was right. We're the only ones here.
How long do you think we have?
Not long.
Coming up to the car crash soon. We had a car crash.
Follow me.
And for reasons various. This is a blue screen shot, and the car feels like it's going very fast. At this point in time, it actually was, and it did crash into the car there, but we put in a different shot and made it seem like it stopped, so it didn't crash into the car. But on the day, it actually did. It did crash. Lots of reasons why, and we don't need to go into that.
Yes.
These high shots here are done from on top of a car looking down onto an area. Nothing more than that. The car's tracking along.
This is it.
Again, that shot is almost the exact same shot as used earlier, just lit differently by Peter Brewer so that it feels like it's in the same scene as now. So you put the same shot from a completely different scene, you give it lighting effects and you give it a colour effect, and suddenly it feels like the exact same shot is in a different scene. And all of this is blue screen. Yeah, probably the only thing that's a bit disappointing through this sequence is a few of the shots, if you look at the very top of the frame, get a bit blacked out, and it was just something I didn't realise until it was too late. When I actually created the shots, I couldn't see it, and it wasn't until after I'd rendered them out that the effect showed that there was blackness there. And it was actually the effect, or the problem, came from me blurring too much the background in a certain way, and I needed to blur it in a different way. It was just something I learned along the way, but a few of the shots actually still carried that darkening effect. I think mainly with Dave Kreuter, who comes into the scene. Everything else, I mean, this is all blue screen. It's 100% blue screen. All the backgrounds are created, and it's just cut in such a way that it just works. And I spent a lot of time thinking about how this would be cut together, how I would move the characters so that their movement would feel real. We wouldn't get distracted by where are they, you just know where they are. And even when he ducks down, the cuts are he ducks out of frame, he comes back into frame, so you just know where he is. You don't ever question what's happening. And all of that's very intentional. And when he spins back to her, you spin into a close-up. She gets upset, he'll spin around here and he spins into a close-up, or so that. And then, back to him. You just constantly showing where are the characters, what are they doing, and then Dave walking in the background. This is all very intentional because we're just so limited in the way we could shoot this. Just had to be very mindful of putting the audience in the right spot. just never had room for a wide shot. The only wide shot really is when she goes up in the air in a moment here. And again, this is a massive effect. I feel like it's a massive effect shot. It feels like an effect shot. She goes up, Dave's going down, she's going up. It doesn't really sell that well, and part of the reason why is it's too wide, and you just can't get wide in a scenario like this. You need more money to be able to, shoot the blue screen. You need more money to be able to really set up the set to make it realistic. I mean, the perfect scenario in this case would have been to actually create this set, but it just financially was not viable to do it. It needed too much movement, too much interaction. We would have needed blue screen anyway, so it kind of was like, well, if we need blue screen anyway, let's just shoot the whole thing blue screen. Every shot has blue screen elements, and that just takes hours and hours to make the shots work, to create the backgrounds, to make the angles work, to get rid of the blue from behind them and make it not look like it's got blue behind them, or that their hair hasn't got blue seeping through it. Just takes hours and hours. I mean, ultimately, it's the same problem that is repeated over and over, and you just change the angles. So when you kind of watch it and it feels like it sits together, it doesn't feel too bad. But when you're doing it shot by shot, it really feels like a massive, arduous task. And it's it really is the reason why it took 7 years to make, because it just was sitting at the computer doing the work required in order to make each shot work. It just took hours.
He's dead.
There's a few little effect shots. I never was happy about throwing the knife around, so every time the knife kind of flows from one person to the other, it's an effect shot. It's always careful of safety, so rather than even risking the knife being thrown, that's all an effect shot. Obviously that one is. Every time the knife kind of moves from person to person, or it's stabbed into someone, it is an effect shot. The knife isn't even in the frame. It's not in the hand of the person. It's replaced later, and that was just a safety aspect that we did throughout the movie.
Ariane, I need you to go to the cave.
Again, lots more effects here. There's some different. This scene actually got reinvented during editing, and I added in this little moment where the long stone that's hanging out is starting to crack. I just felt like it was nice to have a little more tension, and the way it was cut together originally was a little bit dorky, so this just added a little more tension. I think it's still a little dorky, but this is kind of nice where this breaks off and almost hits Dave, and that's 100% CG. And I think if you slow it down, you can tell that it is. It's not perfect. Some of these scenes really suffered just from our budget restraints. We just couldn't make them quite work properly. But we did the best we could. I really feel happy with the way a lot of this blue screen stuff worked. There's a lot of challenges in trying to make some of this, particularly when the camera's moving. Every time the camera's moving, it just adds a little bit of a challenge to everything. This little move here, there was actually a big mat in the background that was blocking some of the light, and I had to remove that, and it actually overlapped Cassie's hair as she flung it around. So there's all those little things. You got to just cut it out manually, frame by frame. It takes time. This is a handheld shot, which for this kind of production is really difficult. A handheld shot, watch how it moves around, but it still feels like it's real. And there's a lot of challenges that come from a handheld shot in this location, let alone a camera moving. So we challenged ourselves a lot for the budget that we had to make this movie, and on the most part, most of those things paid off. Whenever you got someone with hair flicking around, it's always trouble when it comes to blue screen. Yeah, I was pretty happy with how most of those shots came together. This was something we shot very early on, and I was not happy. We shot it on a lens that was very wide, and you can kind of see part of the faults in the lens. If you look to the edges, there's a lot of darkness around the edges, and Pete Brewer's done all he can to kind of fix that up. So as we started to realise there was limitations in what we were shooting, the smoke there was a CG effect. As she hit the smoke, the cigarette that flies up in the air is added later.
Damn, he's blocked the car.
It's just so much of this shoot. It's just, you think a big budget movie, you go, oh, they did this shot. Even that car coming up over the hill, that's an effect. There's just so much. Every single shot almost has an effect, and in a movie of this budget, it becomes tiresome and laborious. Even just speeding up a shot like this, we speed it up, but you want it to feel real. We've shot it handheld, so you've got to kind of smooth out the handheld move in order to make it feel real. There's so many challenges that just arise. Now we're dealing with blue screen, and the lighting that comes with that, and can we make it feel real with the other shots that we've shot that are real, shots shot on cars, and there's so many challenges.
We're not going to be able to get to race.
Visually, here the hardest thing is just keeping everything looking the same. You've got blue screen that is as difficult as you can create, trying to cut in with the occasional live shot, and it's just very difficult. It almost becomes more realistic when you jump inside a very red cave that is completely fabricated. Yet the camera's still moving and the characters are still moving.
Here we go. They can land here. It's not too far away.
Great. Let them know where it is.
What it says is, destroy the curse. Something about a message. The light.
I had, for any still frames, and there was a still frame that started this scene, I had a little shot of a bicycle which I just shot on a handheld, and I just added that movement to any still frames just to give away that movement. This shot with Andrew starts on his hand. It was the first day of shooting, and I just loved it. I was instantly in love with the look that we could create with this lens adapter, even though probably the failing of it in this scene here is that everything turns to white, and so there's a lot of clipping that occurs. It both showed the potential and the failures of the way we were shooting it all in one. We were shooting this very late in the day, and it wasn't really great lighting. We just had to live with it, and in the background there's just clipping on that, the clipping on the plane, there's clipping on the car. That's one of the failings of the way in which we shot it. This scene I loved, apart from the blue screen in the background, which I think is very obvious. I love the performances. And I did my best that I could with the blue screen to really make it kind of live, as did Pete Brewer to make it live. You got John lighting the eyes, even with the reflection of light in the rear vision mirror. So he's doing a lot of work to make it real and organic, and yet lifeless. I like the way this is cut. I think this is cut quite nicely. Again, it sits within the rest of the frame of the movie. These little zooms that you see when they're in the car are all done in post. They're all done in the edit suite. They're not done by the camera. So this is all fine. That zoom there, this zoom here, these are little zooms that happen or added afterwards. I thought that was a nice touch. This was the right scene to do that in. It's not something I've really done anywhere else. Just a little touch to give appropriate energy. That shot there is one of my favourites of Dave, saying yes. Again, sometimes with performance, just the background, the lighting, it just doesn't matter because the performance is just so good, it just sells the moment. And I was really impressed with what both the actors did in this case.
All we've ever known. If it is a fountain of youth, eternal life.
I spent a lot of time just trying to get the beats right in this scene. Even musically.
Be unstoppable.
To really make the music sell the moment, for it to stop in the right moment, and for it to be appropriate. It was a really difficult scene to kind of sell, but one of those scenes that you kind of go for. You either take it by the neck or you don't, and I feel like we took it by the neck and it worked. And ultimately, you see a bit of compassion at the end. And yet ultimately, Abigail's compassion is not for...
It's not just me I'm worried about.
It's not for Dave, it's for Max. It's for the other people that she's brought along. This is simply just a shot. It's just we shot at night and there was the headlights, and sometimes that works too, without any extra lighting.
Now, listen carefully. I want you to take it to the playing ceremonial.
This scene, it was getting very dark in the background. We lit it at the foreground and we kind of sold it that he'd be on the patio and there'd be light from the house.
It's in the same place.
Again, we were in this difficult place where we couldn't light. It was very difficult to light. It's obviously a very strong effect shot, probably a little too strong for anything in hindsight.
There's
But
someone behind us.
it felt kind of okay when we did it.
Max.
This is all shot during the daytime with headlights on and looking down, so you couldn't see any skyline. There's a shot here which is done a very unorthodox way when he kind of hits the car. It's actually done in not a 3D program at all. Very unorthodox the way that I kind of did that shot, where I actually took photos of the car from every angle and reconstructed the car in a program that just was not meant to do it. And I think it actually looks okay in the long run, but yeah, it was a very unorthodox way to come to that final resolution.
Let's find out how useful you are. I'll meet you in the car.
We start to get into some really fun shots here. This is all shot during the day. We've got a replacement there of the number plate. Obviously the lights are changed coloured. Pete Brewer's done a great job to make this all look like it's night time. It's all shot during the day. This is included, and the next shot's included, which is one of my favourite shots. Just the silhouette, the darkness, and it's fantastic. But again, that's not the moon making that. That's daytime. This is effect shot. This is one of the best computer effect shots we did, because it incorporates a person into it, and with the movement that was created, that was actually really difficult to create. But it feels organic. It moves quite nicely. You won't see big camera moves in the computer world like that include a person. Not in a low budget movie like this. Even shots like this, you see the camera's got that little bit of wobble. That's that wobble. I shot that bicycle and just added that wobble to all of these shots. Just gives a bit of life, just gives a little bit of movement, so it doesn't feel like just static. Otherwise it will feel like a still frame, and really everything is still. And it's just that little bit of movement that gives it life. Even the lights here, you'll notice in the car, the lights are flashing. It feels like other cars are going past. John did a lot of work to make sure that it felt like there were other cars going past, lighting up different elements. And again, just gives it life. That branch was hit against there were two different shots shot at the same time, so I don't even know if they were in the same room at the same time. So we did a wide shot, and we just remembered that it was of a certain width, and shot it with Jess, and then shot it with Andrew, hitting the branch against a ladder. And when we shot it against Jess, we had someone behind and moved her hair so that it looked like the branch had hit her hair.
Is that who took it?
And apart from that, it's all blue screen anyway, so all the backgrounds aren't real. So even the lack of focus is often incorporated as a visual element. It's not within the lens. So when you see someone that's a lot out of focus, it's because we've added that later. It's not because it was actually naturally shot that way.
I'm fine. Let's not hang around arrive.
Abigail.
You see Andrew's quite sharp there in the background of the David's close-up, and that was the case of the way we shot this. So whenever there is a big kind of depth of field, or a small depth of field in terms of you're seeing someone a long way out of focus, it's because that's been forced
Mouth of a river emerald.
when we're dealing with these blue screen shots.
From here.
Again, the camera's free to move in these shots.
Don't have the clue.
That was quite a difficult shot. There's so much happening to make this work. People are lighting it is making it work. The original shots are making it work. The way it's integrated with the foreground is making it work. The music is making it work. It's just everything. Even the light effects there, where you can see the light creating shadow and mist. That's a separate effect that's done, and for it to move as they move is very complicated. You've got sound effects happening. Even the angles that you choose to use, if you use a certain angle, it'll show off something you don't want to show off. So you got to think about where you shoot things from. It's all very complicated. And then you've got some great performances. A little twist on that shot. That originally was not in the shot we did in blue screen. That was added in later. But again, just the moment suited a little Dutch tilt there. So
It says return, so
you got to put it in. And it just adds a further layer of complication to everything that's happening. Foregrounds, backgrounds, lighting.
Will protect the one you love until you return.
Max?
And each shot happens so quickly, you don't necessarily understand or know what's happened in order to make it function, to make it work.
The rock hollow. She only saw the first part, which means whoever she told is looking in the wrong place.
The sky's replaced there, so we shot the sky and then we went back and shot it again at a different exposure and then had to replace it. And again, that number plate is replaced.
The emerald's that way. There's a lookout up here that'll hopefully show us what we're looking for.
The shot up here is flipped, and just because that one there is flipped, just because I completely shot at the wrong angle. Sometimes you get it in your mind, we're going to shoot it a certain way, and when you get to set, you can get tricked into thinking, okay, I actually need to shoot this from a different angle, and it's often what you originally had in your mind that's just right. The lesson I learnt there, go with what's in your mind, and just, often
Could be anyway.
what you're thinking is going to sell it correctly. Don't necessarily second guess angles.
Should be here already.
Obviously, you've got continuity looking after what way are people looking in at certain times, but sometimes when you don't go with your instincts, you fail yourself and you have to flip shots to make it work. The backgrounds here are nice apart from just as close-ups. I was never happy with being that close in the background. It just kind of fell apart to me, and it would have been nice even looking down on the phone. The backgrounds were not quite right. I would have liked more time to be able to work on that. It's one of those things, more money, more time, you could create something that looks better. It's not a lot special effects wise. This was a relatively simple scene. Apart from shooting it with a lot of camera movement, and apart from the fact that we did a pickup shot, which is that shot there. This is a year later we shot this one shot. I think you can kind of see that Dave's older. Apart from that, there's not much in this. There's some lighting considerations, but apart from that, there's not much to it from a visual effects point of view. This scene was really interesting because you really get a sense of the depth of field. You see how far the backgrounds are blown out, and we get even closer again.
Just wondered
on each of the
if you saw
characters.
anything else.
And really, we showed this to the crew, and the one
It's nothing to be
thought
worried
that
about, apart from the fact
was
that you go
mentioned
crazy.
was that the blood
Chris, you're not going
on
crazy.
Andrew, which you can kind of see there, is a bit
Enough with
purple.
this state of isolation.
His bruises were just not kind of the right colour, and people did a good job of kind of fixing that up, making it feel real. Obviously, a couple of shots it slipped through.
Max, what did you see?
Honestly, I don't know.
You got to imagine this is shot. There's waves, a lot of sound. So we've gone back
Got it.
and revoiced everything, every bit of dialogue. There's not a single bit of dialogue that's from the original movie. Everything's revoiced because there was too much noise where we shot, and we just didn't have the ability to be able to isolate the voices while we were shooting. So it was a decision that was made very early on that we're going to revoice everything, and actually freed us up in a lot of ways to just shoot, not have to worry about what was happening sound wise at the time. Again, a lot of visual effects. The camera's moving rapidly, and the challenges when the camera moves this much is just immense. But you go through those challenges and it works. And you end up with a guy who's dying in the back of two people who are kissing. Again, all shot at different times. None of that was shot at the same time. Now, if you looked at the original shots of any of this stuff, it just looks very different. Even them walking in, they're walking in blue screen. They're not walking from behind anything. They're just walking in on blue screen, pretending that they have to walk around something. This stuff looking up always seemed a bit fake. I'm not necessarily happy with the stuff looking up at Cassie. This stuff looking back at Andrew and of Dave Donchi I was really happy with, and even looking down at Dave Seraphin.
We should get out of here.
Again, it's all... It wasn't shot this orange. You kind of match it in so it looks right. And cut it around like you normally would, and it feels right. It's funny because this scene particularly was such a challenge to put together. When you put a bit of space between the time that you created it and the time you watch it back, it actually cuts together okay, and you kind of go... You forget all the challenges that happen to make each individual shot happen. You kind of see it cut together, and you see it as what an audience will see it, and you can start to enjoy it. Hopefully you've put it together in such a way in which all of the challenges that you had, the audience don't see.
Below the plain of Bethlehem.
I think this change into blue was a massive challenge, and from a lighting point of view a massive challenge, and from a grade point of view a massive challenge. And it seems relatively seamless, and
But it's hard to read.
probably an audience is going to sit there and go, okay, I know it's not real, but hopefully the story is there and it's strong enough to let people understand it, and hopefully the performances are there. Andrew, who plays Max, did a really good job through this.
Manna from heaven and water.
There's a lot of unsung heroes,
If
and
you believe such things.
I've heard of it too.
it's enjoyable to watch.
You're lucky to still be alive.
Andress. Yes. I do believe you're right.
And this is all very challenging. Shots like that with, behind Jess, the background is not great. And again, it's time and money to make that better. When you're struggling for time, you kind of go, okay, that background will do. We've just got to make it work. And the thought of trying to spend hours and probably 3 or 4 days trying to improve the background, you haven't got it. We're now into a scene, obviously, where there's not... It really is just about the camera work. It's about the performances, about the audio, and
I'll hold him up.
there's a few little tricks that we do in this scene just to help it. One is when we shoot it from up above. One, there's a little cut in that's... just me picking up a stick, which we forgot to do up at the Grampians, and so we did it down in Warburton. So this little cut in that happens. No, it's about to happen. happens here. That's Warburton. And you kind of, sometimes there's a shot you forget and you just have to go back and find a place where you can cut it in so that it'll feel normal. And you've got the big smash of the stick, which Dave did once, but we didn't have enough stick, so we really had to time that at the right time when he broke it so that we didn't need it again in that way. Really, apart from the way we shot this in terms of letting punches kind of sit through frame and the sound effects tell us when actual hits happened. The only visual effects happen when I fall off the cliff, which happens in a moment. There's one shot that kind of, this one there, it's a visual effect, and then the knife when it moves, it's obviously a visual effect. And I think both the knife shots sit quite well. They feel very realistic. The one of me falling off the cliff is a little, I don't know, I tried as hard as I could, just didn't seem quite right. Probably needed me to fall further off the cliff. And again, just money. You're creating a shot with very little ability to shoot what you really want. You don't have a big open space to be able to shoot. So you're creating stuff with what you've got. Even that shot there with Dave and Cassie, there was actually some bollards that were in shot that were removed. So you can do stuff, and no one will ever know. The visual effects are a funny thing. Sometimes you get away with it and no one would ever know. Sometimes it's quite obvious. This is a lovely location to shoot in. We end up in a CGI shot, which, again, I spent hours and hours trying to get this right, and just never quite seems real. And you use the best programs you can, it just never quite sits right. This scene here is actually shot between two different locations, 2 different days. One's a pickup, one was very early in our shooting. And it looks different. Dave's done an okay job to kind of get the skin right. The backgrounds don't quite sell the same time of day. But hopefully, again, people don't notice. It's that different. And then we come out to some lovely shots here, which, there's nothing not real. There's a bit of a jump cut there, and I wish it didn't quite happen. Obviously, that's all effects. That both the hit on the ground and the hit on Max, and the blood flowing is a makeup effect, which we actually did while we were having lunch, because I kind of realised, I don't have any close-ups of the blood coming out after we'd shot the scene. Everyone was freezing. I couldn't very well take the time to do it then. So we got into a warmer spot. We had lunch, and then we just grabbed his shirt and made another hole in it, and did that. And this is all pickup, so we knew we could kind of ruin the shirt, and it wasn't going to be the end of the world.
Don't be sad, Abby. You need to do this.
It's one of those scenes we never got to shoot while we were originally planning to shoot. We had to come and do it as a pickup. And the performances were amazing. Everything's shot first take. When it's this cold, you just don't have the time to, ask for multiple shoots. The actors are literally freezing. You've got to get jackets on. As soon as the take's done, you've got to get jackets on. I gave up my jacket so that at least I was kind of feeling some of the cold, but I had sleeves on still. And you just cannot appreciate really what the actors were going through in order to get these shots.
There you are.
Cassie particularly. All 3 of them were brilliant. But Cassie is kind of a level above. She is a brilliant performer. I think everyone who watches the movie will kind of sees her as a standout performer. This is a really nice computer-generated shot. It about 95% feels real to me, and
You okay?
I'm happy with that. I put the little white dots in to kind of sell that we were ultimately going towards them. And there's a dissolve that happens just to get them into this moment. And in a film like this, dissolves are very rare, so it's kind of a moment to transition time that they're heading into the forest. This is shot on many different locations, even though it was actually within the same area. One was very flat, one was on quite a hill, and it was more just the practicalities of shooting that we did that. So you cut from him kind of walking down the hill, and then he cuts to walking flat. That's a very different location. And then in a moment when Cassie looks down on them, it's a very different location. So this all feels very flat, and it's really about getting this light, this feel within the trees. That shot there is actually the stuff of David looking back there is actually shot in his mum's backyard, so we had to add in again, you run out of time to shoot everything in the location, so sometimes you just got to do a couple of pickup shoots. And that one shot, to me it still doesn't quite sit right, but Pete's done a great job to make it sit within the scene. And this is Cassie looking down on them. It's all in a very different location, but you got to again try and make it feel like it all is in one spot. In a moment she walks into a CG shot, and obviously it has a Dutch tilt like the shots preceding it do. I kind of wanted it to feel like it's all in the same spot. I don't think it quite kind of sells completely, but it was, the intention was there, and she looks back and the focus throws to the trees and it pulls back to her. And then we see where she's looking at, and obviously we're dealing with a 3D element here. I did my best with the 3D stuff to make it feel real, but there is obviously a limit to what you can do. The bread that you see there is real, and it's matted in on top of a background. And even these backgrounds, you can see the trees moving, so when you render them out, it takes a long time to render the backgrounds. Then you got to pull them all out of focus, and you do a lot of work to create stuff that will ultimately be very blurry.
It's just down there.
Might take a week of rendering to create something that will be out of focus and in the background, and in which people will still go, oh, that's not real. No, it's a tough gig. This little hole here we created for her to fall down, that wasn't there in the ground. And obviously when she falls down through it. The actual shot of her falling is her jumping off the same building that Daniel jumped off earlier. And then you literally, frame by frame, cut her out and put her into the shot. A lot of little complexities, and if you slow down frame by frame the shots, you can see what's going on, but do a lot of work to try and make it feel seamless. And then fall again. It's a little wood and rock effects to kind of help it feel real.
I'm surprised to see you here.
And I'm surprised you made it at all.
There's stuff going on in the background here. You've got some people digging barrels and all kinds of things that you try and throw in there to just help give a bit of movement, help make it feel real. Each of these shots, so I might have a shot of all 7 of them, but we only have a shot, 2 or 3 people at once. So those shots where you see 7 people are actually group shots all bunched together. There's a lot of that. A shot like that, there's a lot of work to make that happen, make it feel real. And even when we were shooting, you've got to get them all looking in the right direction. There's a lot of work even in a scene like this to just get the actors looking in the right places so that it feels real.
But surely it makes you happy to know he's still alive. How could you kill your own brother?
So what's so important?
I would have liked, I actually forgot to do a certain angle on Grant here, who plays Alan Scott, which is kind of him looking down at both Abigail and him looking down at both
Noah's Ark.
Jack,
Ironically,
and I cannot remember the reason why I forgot to do that angle. It's just something that happened through shooting.
but once
And when I came to edit it, I realised I don't have this angle of him, which would have been really nice, because all these little moments where he's looking straight at them would have been really great.
Noah's Ark.
And I kind of had to cut around. I had to cut to the reactions rather than cut to him talking. And quite often I had to flip him kind of backwards in order to put him in the right position.
we will bring Elindil and all the brothers back and demand.
And we've even got,
everywhere
a thing like
worship
what he's got in his hand is just a red block.
just as his
So
history
at times, at the right angle, you've got to
Tree of life was.
put the information on the front of it.
No, Jack. In
as he walks
time,
across.
you'll find Elindil's
As he said, it was really
time
hard.
were perfect.
I changed a lot of things.
To even predict
And that's flipped. That line was originally to Abigail, and I made it to Jack. So you can do a lot of really interesting things with the edit, and to make it kind of just sit right and make it work. Again, the camera's still moving a lot. This is all blue screen. The camera's still moving a lot, and it's not easy to do these shots and make them work. And he's got something in his hand which isn't real. I had to replace that completely. So that's all got to be tracked and moved and got information on it. All these things, even he's about to jump down and a little cut there, make that work. Lots going on. This fight was pretty full on. A lot of it's blue screen, but then we flick into an element which is not, and to try and marry that all together is quite difficult. I had to make a lot of this a lot darker than I originally intended in order to make the shoot, which we put in about halfway through, feel like it's part of the rest of it. This is all blue screen, just dealing with very difficult elements, knives being pulled out of things, hands going through, being cut, just, even it all feels very handheld, and some of this was handheld again, and just the budget that we have is not designed to cope with these kind of restraints or these kind of complexities, and yet we did it.
Come on, quick, hurry, you fool! Hurry, come on, quick, grab it out, quick!
When you get a lot of movement, sometimes you see a bit of blue. When you get so much movement through frame, you just cannot hide the blue screen, and you've got to really soften the key in those few moments. And sometimes you soften it so much that whatever you're looking at disappears. So it's a hard little world. You've got action scenes, people fighting, arms moving quickly, and it's very difficult to make that all seem seamless and real in an environment. So now we jump into the element that wasn't, this is not CG. This is all real backgrounds. We actually shot this, and it's all just dark with this smoke and bits of wood and bark. And probably my only regret is this little moment here where Handris, it's a bit weak where he comes in. I should have cut to a shot of him before I cut to her on the ground. And if I have a chance to be George Lucas and remake it, I will put that in. There's a lot of energy happening here. All of this, again, not CG. There's a few flips. Although we've got a moment here with CG. The knife is added in here. There's no knife really in that shot. I think it sits quite nicely. These shots are all real. Up until the point that this person arrives and then he falls on a CG knife. That's not real in any way. And not real when Jess goes on it. And now it is real. It's just under her arm. Every shot, trying to make it real. Make it sit. Make it flawless. This is just acting effects. Makeup effects. Nothing more than that. There's this effect here where the blood comes down and you see the gaping hole. That's actually a CG effect. The rest of this is just makeup and acting from my part. maybe not the best acting. I had to do all the voices during this bit. I couldn't get Dave to do that, so I could actually do his voice through this section as well.
Quick, get out of here. I must get the seal.
Obviously, all of this is just so much is CG. It's real outside. This is all CG. The seal that he's got is CG. The knife is completely CG. The backgrounds are all CG. There's a great little moment, and I think it's this person here that my brother did. He just comes yelling in. Rah! It's so funny. When we shot it, obviously doesn't quite sit with the same hilarity in the movie. But all of this is, even that, the seal dropping there is not real. The explosions are obviously not real. It's just, there's so much. And that falling shot was quite an achievement, because really, we shot them on the ground and then we pan the camera back to them. And it sells really well that they've flown through the air. It's one of those shots that you go, how do we pull that off? It just kind of sits so well, you would never think it's anything other than what's actually happened. You think, oh, how did they dive onto those mats? There must be mats there because they've flown, and it really is, they're just lying on the ground acting. It sits so well. And then you get into more CG in the cars. Well, sorry, not CG, this is just backgrounds that we shot through on the way down from Mount Hotham.
We were in Noah's Ark.
It sits nicely. It's not. I think it's still. You kind of go, okay. The background and the foreground aren't perfect, and if you shot it really, probably the background would blow out so much anyway. And I used a lot of blur to kind of try and make it sit over the top of their faces and really give it a sense of the background's overexposed and their faces are there. Hopefully the performances are what people concentrate on and they don't focus on the background being not perfect. And again here you've got a number plate that's been replaced. You've got Jack's car in shot, and you've got a shot from earlier on that's basically this sequence as Cassie walks up is repeated. There's not a lot of effects used through the end here. We darkened down the glasses a little bit because as we cut it together we realised you could see Grant's eyes moving. In this particular section we didn't actually have his makeup prosthetics on his eyes. Because he kept the glasses on, it wasn't necessary to have it on. But unfortunately we could kind of see his eyes blinking. The lighting just kind of captured one of his eyes every now and then, so that had to be darkened down. And that was done in the colour grade process. Even the colours here look spectacular. The green, the brown. Pete did a great job to really make all these sets come alive, considering we shot this on HDV, which is not a very forgiving format, and he really brought it to life.
I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Jack was killed when the Ark was destroyed.
When Jack comes out, he's holding a silver little can,
There was nothing.
and that had to be replaced with the wooden seal.
Sounds like your quest has brought you a great deal of
I think it sells quite nicely. I don't think you'd ever notice that it's been replaced.
I wish there was something I could do in return.
Well, eventually pain and sadness find all of us. No one can stop that. But let me release you from a part of the burden that you carry. Remember I told you about a man? A member of the clan? One that could not be killed?
Handress. Yes. Jack stabbed him.
Handress? No. The knife was called Handress. It was Helen.
Helen. Your brother?
My twin, Jack's uncle.
I think it's time we found the Tree of Life.
And now, you throw away your life!
Obviously, we jump back to some effects here. It's all to show off that ultimately our heroes were there all along. We may not have recognised them.
Dad!
And from basically the first scene that we had, Dave and Ray, the first scenes that weren't historic scenes they are a part of. And Abigail's just kind of realising that they were so integral. Music throughout the movie was really important. And it kind of felt to me like it was important to end with something that was reminiscent maybe even of a Transformer movie. The movie's pretty intense throughout, and I always wanted the music to kind of be like an extra character, and maybe I overdid that slightly. It was very much intentional, and sometimes you make mistakes by overdoing things. Sometimes you need to pull things back, but I really wanted the emotional state of the characters to be underlined by what the music was doing. And yeah, it's a difficult thing that you do. The music took hours, I mean it took months to kind of put together and make it right. And when you say make it right, maybe it wasn't quite right. You do your best. Lastly, the last visual effect is the fact that our credits here are not just straight onto camera, they actually are on a slight angle. And I thought that was a nice little touch. The music changes and everything's just slightly moving away from camera. It's a bit Star Wars-esque when they do the beginning little reads. So an homage to Star Wars in our credits.